He was a boy, she was a girl. Can I make it any more obvious? Yes. Hey guys, welcome to this mini episode of Loud Poets Happy Hour. I am Dr. Katie Ailes. I'm your host for Happy Hour, and if you haven't seen it before, this is our series in which we take on poetry writing challenges, we offer some guidance on how to complete them, we write them ourselves, and we chat about all of it with you. You can watch the full Happy Hour series through the link in the eye, and please make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video so that you don't miss any of our other upcoming videos. Now, you may have noticed that I am currently dressed as Canada's favorite daughter, Avril Lavigne, and that's because our current challenge here on Happy Hour is the Sk8er Boi challenge. This challenge was proposed by our dear friend, although potentially now arch nemesis, Tyrone Lewis, and it is to take Avril Lavigne's magnum opus, Sk8er Boi, and to extend it. As Tyrone says, he was a punk, she did ballet. What more can I say? Oh, you can say more. On a personal note, this challenge is close to my heart. Avril Lavigne's 2002 album Let Go, which features Sk8er Boi, was the first CD I ever bought. I used to play it constantly on my Walkman. If you don't know what that is, look it up. And I was also a ballerina who had some crushes on some punks, so this song became somewhat of a personal anthem for me throughout my teenage years. However, I recognize that for many of you, writing poetry inspired by Sk8er Boi may not be at the top of your creative priorities. So for today's 5 top tips video, I'm going to broaden my guidance somewhat. In today's video, we're going to focus on the fascinating world of poetry about figures from pop culture, both real celebrities and fictional characters, and all of the varying techniques that poets have used to extend their narratives, give them backstories, and really bring them to life from varying perspectives. Hopefully the tips in this video will be useful to you, whether you want to write about one of the characters in Sk8er Boi, or Superman, or Vin Diesel, any sort of figure from pop culture. As always, guys, every example that I mention is linked in the description below. So let's get to it, and let's start here. While this challenge might seem unique and bizarre, there's actually a lot of poetry which engages directly with figures from pop culture. One of the stereotypes about poetry that I think has actually been really harmful is that it has to engage with certain themes and contexts. For example, pastoral scenes of fields and lakes, or innocent romantic love, and that it can't engage with the gritty, daily, mundane instances of existence. For a simple example of this, consider, how many poems have you seen about flowers versus how many about cell phones? We use our phones a heck of a lot more than we interact with flowers, but one subject is considered more poetic than the other. And 99% of the time, the topics that we're encouraged to see as poetic are primarily accessible to the privileged. Yes, write about the beautiful afternoon that you spent on the lake, but definitely don't write about your experience trying to access job seekers allowance. I say all of this because the challenge of writing about characters in a pop song might seem silly on its face, but I love it because it challenges us to reevaluate the boundaries of what's considered appropriate for poetry and to really push at some elitist restrictions. So poetry focusing on figures in pop culture, real or fictional, can take many forms, and I'll give several examples throughout this video of different approaches. Much of this work imaginatively wonders at the inner worlds of these figures, what's not shown on the screen or in the tabloids. For example, Morgan Parker's poetry collection, There Are Things More Beautiful Than Beyonce, explores the experience of contemporary Black womanhood, including racism and sexism, through the focal point of the celebrity Beyonce. Parker's collection is also about her relationship with Beyonce, real and imagined, the relationship of fan, admirer, fellow Black woman, and artist who is navigating similar but also very different circumstances. Here's a quick excerpt from her poem Slouching Toward Beyonce. The Secret Album, Midnight. O vessel of womanhood, I am loosed upon the world with dust and filed nails. All my life I turn water into wine. The acclaimed poet Claudia Rankine takes a similar approach in her stunning and stylistically innovative text Citizen, an American Lyric, sections of which shine a really hard spotlight on contemporary American racism through looking at the horrible treatment of tennis great Serena Williams. I begin with these examples to indicate how writing about figures in pop culture, whether fictional characters or real people, isn't necessarily a silly undertaking. Instead, you can use these figures as focal points to get at deeper political, cultural, and societal issues. To apply this to our Sk8er Boi challenge, and bear with me here, the song's core narrative is about a ballerina who has a crush on a punk, but she doesn't pursue it because all of her snobby friends stuck up their nose because they have a problem with his shabby clothes. There's maybe something about classism here that you could potentially expand through your poem. Or you could extend the commentary the song carries on restrictive gender roles. He was a boy, she was a girl, can I make it any more obvious? Well, maybe you can make it more obvious how these restrictive gender roles in which girls have to do ballet and boys have to be punks and they have to slot into particular heteronormative relationships are maybe a little bit problematic for us societally. I get that this might seem like stretching a pop song too far, but my point here is that you can take relatively light source material from pop culture and use it as a lens through which to make broader, more profound societal statements. How you use the source material, how you shift it, extend it, add to it, is entirely up to you. We'll return to the more somber options in a bit, but for our next tip, let's dip into the surreal side of poetry about pop culture and watch this. If you've been involved in the Scottish spoken word scene in the last decade, you'll be aware of the amazing Andrew Blair. And if you're aware of Andrew Blair, then you are definitely also aware of his deep creative obsession with the actor Robert Pattinson. Andrew has so many poems about Robert Pattinson that in 2017 he performed a 2-hour-long show at Hidden Door about the actor, and in 2020 he brought out a pamphlet with speculative books entitled The Are Pat's Facts 2020. He's performed several of these poems at our shows over the years, and we have one on our channel. So here is the beginning of Andrew Blair's poem, Careers Advisory Test Results for Robert Douglas Thomas Pattinson.
You, Robert Pattinson, you will be someone who designs security shutters for small, independent high street retailers. You will throw yourself into the work and eventually win an award for innovation in 2020. You will meet Isabel in 2016 at an industry conference, and whatever it is, you will hit it, sever it quite off. The hotel room will have mottled wallpaper in pale green and orangey hues that you will focus intensely on while trying to delay orgasm. They look like a test for color blindness. You will later be tested for color blindness. You will not be colorblind, but the testing process will make you largely horny.
So what Andrew does in this piece is he takes a figure from pop culture, the Hollywood heartthrob Robert Pattinson, and he invents a complete alternate reality for him, a life in which Robert Pattinson designs security shutters and has a fairly quotidian life with quotidian problems. The poem is surreal, absurd, but also somewhat profound. It's an askance view at the bizarre nature of celebrity, how we elevate certain people culturally who otherwise would and could have had entirely normal, unremarkable lives. In some of Andrew's other poems about Robert Pattinson, he sticks relatively closely to the actual facts of the actor's life. But what I love about this poem is how it imaginatively is free. It takes bare bones of this guy's name, right? But then it invents a totally alternate path. So it takes the basic framework, but then expands, creates, imagines from there. And this brings up an important point. If the figure from pop culture you're writing about is a real person, like a celebrity, you don't necessarily have to limit your poetry to sticking to the actual known facts of their life. You can apply some of the same creative license that you might take to writing fictional characters to invent a backstory or here an alternate reality for this figure. Now, there are some ethical boundaries here, as there always are when we're writing about real people. I don't have time to get into all of the nuances of them, but rule of thumb, be kind, don't punch down. To briefly note a project which is quite similar to Andrew Blair's writing about Robert Pattinson, the author Helen McClory has a book called The Goldblum Variations. This wonderful book devoted to Jeff Goldblum features not only creative writing, but also puzzles, games, and illustrations. What I love about Andrew Blair and Helen McClory's work is that they don't stop at the surface level. They dive deep into the characters of these celebrities, taking publicly available knowledge and expanding it to create these fantastical, detailed backstories and alternate realities and alternate personas. So when you're writing about a figure from pop culture, don't cap your imagination. Really nerd out, obsess over the details so that your audience is interested and engaged and wants to learn more too. For instance, if you're expanding the character of the ballerina from Sk8er Boi, don't limit yourself to just figuring out her favorite color or her career ambitions. I want to know if she always forgets to use a coaster under her coffee, if she believes in heaven, if she cracks the spines of books before reading them. Really obsess over the details, guys. It'll bring your characters to life. And for a wonderful example of a fictional character explored through poetry, read this. So far, we've looked at poetry which examines celebrities, real people, but the tools of backstory invention and character expansion are fantastic to use on fictional characters as well. This is a version of fan fiction, taking existing characters and narratives and creatively expanding upon them. One of the most powerful examples of this technique that I've read is Does Marge Have Friends by Raphael Bob Waksberg. It focuses on the well-loved central character from The Simpsons. Raphael Bob Waksberg is best known as the creator of the animated series BoJack Horseman, and this poem demonstrates the same blend of humor and deep sadness that show is acclaimed for. The poem begins with a series of pretty basic questions about Marge Simpson's social life. Who are Marge's friends? Is Helen Lovejoy a friend? Sarah Wiggum? Agnes Skinner? To whom does Marge spill her secrets over coffee on cold days? Who laughs at Marge's jokes? Who knows Marge, truly and well? But as the poem progresses, the language becomes increasingly descriptive as it considers the loneliness of Marge's existence. Here's a line from later on. Marge wandered into the night, a fleck of yellow in a blanket of white stars, and she felt, as she often did, alone. Similarly to with Andrew Blair's poetry about Robert Pattinson, as readers we're confronted with some tonal dissonance here, and we may be conflicted regarding how to respond. Do we laugh at the absurdity of speculating at the inner grief of a blue-haired, bright yellow animated fictional character? Or do we allow ourselves to be emotionally moved by her plight and even to change our perspectives on Marge as a character? Here, Raphael Bob Waksberg takes a funny TV show and distills an intimate, haunting portrait from it. He paints the character of Marge in an entirely different medium and tone, revealing her in a different light. As a side note, I love that for a poem which comments on a figure from popular culture, this poem is not published through traditional media like print, but rather unfolds as a series of tweets. You can actually see how many likes and retweets every single line of the poem gets, and this mode of publication seems to emphasize the poem's central point, that popularity, that being well known, does not actually always correspond to being understood or to have kinship or connection with a figure. I also want to shout out Freddie Alexander's amazing poem, I've Never Seen Batman Orgasm, as another great example of poetry speculating on the intimate lives of fictional characters. Obviously not safe for work, but do check that poem out. My tip here is to not be afraid to alter the genre and play around with drastic tonal shifts. Maybe your Sk8er Boi narrative expansion takes the melodramatic form of a soap opera. Or maybe it's written in the form of the last will and testament of the Sk8er Boi rock star, leaving everything he owned to that beautiful ballerina he knew in high school. Take some risks here. And now for a real genre shift, look elsewhere. One of the best creative activities for imaginatively developing characters and expanding the worlds they inhabit is roleplay games. Don't you dare change the video, hear me out. What are RPGs? You've probably heard of Dungeons & Dragons, but there are a lot of different forms of role-playing games out there. Basically, RPGs are communal storytelling games in which each player takes on a different character and acts out that character's decisions within the world that all of the players are interacting in. The games master leads you through that world, setting you tasks and obstacles which you have to overcome in the way that your character would, using dice which represent your skills and abilities. At the core of RPGs is storytelling. It's about developing the character who you're embodying and really understanding their motivations so that you can act out what they would want to do in the storyline. It's like writing fiction and acting all rolled into one. When you're playing an RPG, you literally take the bare bones of a character, their charisma, intelligence, strength, and you add unique detail, you add backstory to fully realize this character. Their merits, their flaws, their histories. And of course, these are very relevant tools to this challenge because these are the same skills at the core of fiction writing, filmmaking, and every other kind of storytelling. Whether or not you're interested in playing RPGs yourself, the character generation resources used by people who play RPGs can be really, really helpful to writers of fiction and poetry and screenplays in order to help develop the characters that you're writing in those contexts. I've linked to a great video by the YouTuber Ginny D, who provides a lot of resources to help RPG players. And in this video, she lays out 50 questions to ask your character to get to know them better. So as you're writing poetry about your figure from pop culture, try using this as a tool. Ask them these questions to learn a little bit more about them. So returning to Sk8er Boi, if I am writing a poem extending the narrative of the ballerina from that poem, I might ask, okay, is she more of a hoarder or a minimalist as I'm developing her character? And my answer might be, okay, she's usually more of a minimalist, but she does hoard all of her old point shoes in a big plastic box in her closet. I might ask, is there a food that she loves that most people hate? And the answer might be, well, her stuck-up friends think that this is gross, so she doesn't really eat it anymore, but she loves putting banana slices on pizza. Now, banana pizza may not appear anywhere in my poem, but the fact that I've taken the time to get to know this character and understand this detail about her really informs my understanding of her whimsical side. It also lets me know, okay, so she has this funny taste, but she succumbs so much to peer pressure that she won't eat her favorite food in front of her friends. So even though the detail might not appear in the poem, my understanding of the character was enhanced through doing the exercise. So in order to bring the pop culture figures that you're writing to life, be as specific and detailed as possible in inventing or embellishing their lives. If you want to go that extra mile, you can even take a leaf from the RPG playbook and try literally role-playing as that character, so you can try physically embodying them and getting to know them inside and out. For our final tip, it's time to stick it to the man and remember, if I have one core philosophy when it comes to poetry, it's to write what you want to write and don't let the naysayers get you down. Let's face it, this is an art form with a lot of snobbery. Just like the friends from Sk8er Boi, the gatekeepers in poetry stick up their nose at poetry which doesn't fit certain archaic conventions, or poets who don't fit the image of what a poet is supposed to look like. So although this challenge seemed on face value kinda ridiculous, I love it for its reminder that poetry can be about anything. About Robert Pattinson, about cows, about two characters from a 20-year-old chart topper. Write poetry which reflects your interests, your reality, your surreality. Don't feel like you need to write the poetry of someone else's world. In the description below, I link to an article about pop culture and poetry by Sk8er, and I want to round off my top tips here by quoting from the ending of her article. As Tarshish powerfully states, The incorporation of references to pop culture is one example of poetry at its best, a meaningful collection of thoughts and ideas about one's surroundings. When poets examine some of the most pertinent cultural issues while drawing from both our reference pools and theirs, we must thank them for being a driving force for our collective reckoning with our surroundings, however beautiful or frightening they may be. So don't omit any aspect of your environment from consideration as fodder for your poetry. From Jeff Goldblum to Marge Simpson, everything that inspires you is worthy of a poem. Guys, that is all for my 5 top tips for writing poetry about figures from pop culture. I really hope that you enjoyed it and got some tips which might apply either to the Sk8er Boi challenge or to whatever writing you are doing right now. Stay tuned, guys. Next Friday, we will be releasing the check-in for this challenge, and then on Sunday, August 1st, we will be releasing the full video in which the rest of the I Am Loud team will share their Sk8er Boi poems. That episode is not to be missed. Remember that to support our work and to submit your own challenges for us to write to, you can sign up to our Patreon for as little as £1 a month. And please do like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel for more poetry goodness. Your support really does mean the world. Thank you again, guys, and see you later, boy.